me, as the one and only Paul Friends, welcoming you to Starfleet Universe On Call. And tonight, well, it's mainly just me. Barry can't make it because he's on his way to Pittsburgh. And then we have, well, Gary's not here at the moment. So hopefully you will enjoy the melodious sounds of my voice. Yes, right now I'm just watching me, nothing on the screen this time. Hoping that the amount of things I did for OBS will work out this week and be really nice, and hopefully we'll continue to work next week. If I have to do what I did this week, I'll do it every single week to get that to work. But anyhow, that's behind the scenes things that I'm sure you don't care about. That as long as I get this working, and of course people on the podcast are going, huh? So, okay. One thing I did forget to mention, and for the people who were listening to the podcast news portion, which was next week, no podcast. And that's because for those people who live in America, it is Thanksgiving, and my wife would frown on me actually having a podcast on Thanksgiving. So I'm not going to have one. Just like I have it off every single year. So it's nothing new for those people who've been watching me and following me for a long time. So with that, hopefully you'll have a wonderful Thanksgiving and enjoy your time with your families, and please stay safe. So this week I want to do a quick review, possibly a little bit longer review, of Captain's Log number 54. Now, I finally got an opportunity a few weeks ago to actually read Gary's story and look through the Captain's Log more, a little more. So I just wanted to review it real quick. When it comes to Gary's story, I think the plot line is good. I really enjoyed that. I think it worked out well. Only had some minor nitpicks in my mind, and that is that some of the wording in my mind were too Starfleet battle-ish. For example, give me a sec here. Where is it? It was. Give me a sec. Some of the stuff cannot be helped. They talked about the B10 and that kind of thing, which is fine. Possibly. This is a good example in my mind, which is they say since Y195. I'm not sure exactly the characters would say Y195. I'm not sure exactly what would be the moniker. Would they say, Earth year 2000 whatever? I think that'd be close to the case. Also, where is it? Yeah, I think I'll let that one go, which was mentions the light TR beams, acting as tractor beams, which is fine. Oh, here it is. This is more to what I'm pointing out, which is the use of, in the case, okay, it says here, meanwhile, his ship moved to approach the Devastator while running the gauntlet of satellite ships. Phaser 2 and light TR beams fire struck his ship's forward shields facings. Now, light TRs, possibly. Because I'm not sure. I don't remember if they actually mentioned tractor repulsor beams. Explicitly, because usually what you want to do for most things is that if you use abbreviation where you say, understood Russ. Russ mentioned he doesn't buy paper anymore. I still do. In fact, I just got the 3 Starmada books in hard copy, because any of you who've listened to me long enough know that one thing that I do is I like to buy the hard copies to read, while I like to have the electronic versions for looking up and indexing and searching, because of, for myself, I really remember the content of things better when I actually read them, in paper. I don't know why. It's just something weird about my brain, where paper really helps me in that category. Now, obviously, in some cases where I'm reading about computer stuff, because I'm a software engineer, I read it mostly on the computer, but that's reinforced by actually working with that technology. So that reinforces it, and so forth. That's another pathway for me to remembering. Now, moving on to this, back to the caps log in the story. The one thing, it says phaser 2s. Now, my understanding is that they're not really phaser 2s, for one. Phaser 2s are the closest simulation of what they have in it's close to what the alphas have, the galactics have. The phaser 2s, it's about around the same damage. Now, if you want to, if in the story it would have been just written phasers, I'd say fine, because of still the galactics didn't understand that they weren't really phasers possibly at that point, but they were a simulation of what a phaser would be. But I guess the big thing that really I don't like when it comes to reading a story is mentioning phaser 2s. If it just said phasers, that'd be fine. In my mind, it's what it should have just said. I think it should just said maybe phasers and TR beams. Not mentioning that there were light TR beams, because if you really want to know if it was light or heavy TR beams, you look at the ship. And that because that is the weapon. The tractor repulsor beam is the weapon. Whether it's a light or heavy version, it depends upon the ship. And in my mind, that's not what you add. You don't add that to the story. You might say TR beam. You might say tractor repulsor beam. I would hope that at some point in the beginning of the story, that they'd mentioned that there were tractor repulsor beams, and they just had a way. It's always talked about it, calling it TRs, things like that, where the terminology, it's not just SFB terms, it's what would be in what you would think that the characters of that universe would use as language, versus now I can see them possibly mentioning that they were like, in the case of Klingons or even Federation, they might say, okay, they had phaser 2s, but I don't think in a story you call them phaser 2s unless you have a particular point that you're making about it was a hasty repair, so so it'd be it fires only as good as a phaser 2, and things like that, where you might want to bring up the point that it's a different kind of phaser, but for the most part you wouldn't say phaser 1, phaser 2, phaser 3. You might say defensive phasers when it comes to phaser 3s. I know I'm pretty sure that's been used in the past. Um, when people, when other authors have denoted the use of phaser threes, they've said defensive phasers. Um, there was at least one other thing that bugged me overall when it comes to that usage. But you know, of everything in the whole story, that's the only thing that I actually would nitpick about at all. It was a wonderful story, good plot. Um, Obviously, the one thing I didn't like, but that's just me, and it's not about the story. It's about the victors in the victors in the scenario, because like playing Andromedans and so forth. I feel like, I want the Andromedans to win. you know, I know that if I want to, I can actually think about it and be happy about it. In that, yes, I did. The Andromedans did win, but then the Galactics kind of cheated and they went back. We able to basically have a ship that traveled back in time. But they went forward in time and then came back in time after they disappeared for how many years, So actually, no, what they did, they jumped forward in time is what they did, and then they came, they met up with people from future in that timeline that they work in. Then they went back and changed time, changed events, and so changed the results of that time. Create a different branch of time. Now, I'm just gonna bring something up real quick about the Andromedans. Now, I'm not sure how many of you have actually played the Andromedans. I doubt it's many of you out there. Just because of most people don't like them. I can understand that because of they take more work than other ships. You have to know these different systems, which are not normal. Especially, I think the biggest issue, obviously, is going to be the PA panels. My guess, if they didn't have the PA panels, if this had shields, people wouldn't be as adverse to them. But at the same time, the reason why I like the Andromedans is because they have the PA panels, because of their technology is so foreign to anything else that's in the Alpha Octant, or even in the whole galaxy, Milky Way galaxy. They're the only empire that actually has a weapon where they displace. They actually move. They jump from one point to another point. Though the Rins, obviously, you want to bring them up. They have that ability, but the way they use it is totally different. In the case of the Rins, they move from point A to point B. They're basically transporting the whole freaking ship from point A to point B, which is interesting if you think about it. And the thing is, that's how they move their ships, which I have issue with transporters as it stands. Versus a displacement beam, I can understand, and I can see how it modifies the time and space. It folds it or whatever, so you can move from one place to another place in space time, which is interesting. And of course, here's the crazy. One thing I was just thinking about when it comes to that, and that is, since it is basically modifying space time itself. It is possible, and of course, the thing is, We don't hear about these stories, and I don't think anyone can ever write these stories. And that is writing up a story about an Andromedan who went back in time, or you know, basically just was displaced in time. That something went walking with a displacement device, and instead of just moving in space, they moved in time. Now, the weird part about that would be would the Andromedans ever find out about it? Obviously, if it displaced into the future, probably not. It's possible, they got destroyed or whatever. They thought they were destroyed. Basically, something along the lines of what happened to the Darwin. Because if you really think about it, when it comes to the Darwin and how it slipped into the future, it is possible that in that case that the Darwin actually slipped through a rift in time caused by the Andromedans. That there might have been a small quirk in that space, and then the Andromedans' use of the displacement device in the area basically ripped a bigger tear in the space-time continuum. So, I think that would be interesting. Actually, in theory, that could be a scenario. Right there, which is that you have one of these scenarios where you have two different combat, two people combating, let's say Klingon versus Fed, and all of a sudden Andromeda pops in. It just pops into existence. It's like what happened, and then I'm not sure what would happen then. Whether they would say, okay, well, we got to get rid of this Andromedan, or they would still just be fighting by fighting out the combat the battle they were going to be doing, and ignore the Andromedan. You never know. So, I think that'd be an interesting scenario to write up. I could possibly write up the. I might not have the best time in the world for that, but so that was in my mind interesting. Now, obviously, a couple of things that Gary mentioned in Capsule number 54 a while back was, of course, the new ships. Some of the, of course, shipyard report. Here's the actually kind of cool one. This one's a little known ship, smaller than a frigate. It's called a Federation corvette. It was in the Y-120s that Starfleet was converting a new ship to the new ship designs. One of which was the Corvette. Oh, it was this frigate. They also designed contemporary as a smaller Corvette, the smallest regular naval ship in the fleet. The Flower class Corvettes were ultimately small ships for small missions. So forth, like that. So, some interesting ships in here. The one thing that's I thought was okay. Can I find it? I just saw it tonight and I was shocked by it. Oh, one thing which I thought was cool is the bringing back of this. In this case, it's called a Starfire Victory number 1. This is by Fleet Captain Peter Bakia, and this is like the Gold Hat tournament, where you actually get write-ups of the different battles that the winner, in this case Peter Bakia, um, went through, defeating his different opponents. It gives a description of basically a summary of the game, which is good. Unfortunately, we have one for. Unfortunately, the Sapphire Victory #2 doesn't have anything. But Bill Scheller, big surprise, no big surprise here, also wrote up same thing. And I have not had a chance to actually go through those, but it's one of those things I really have enjoyed in the past. So, for those people who like tournament play, get the Captain's Log and definitely go through the articles, because it was always, to me, always been very, very much enjoyable. And I don't see it. Oh, there it is. Let's see, we can get this on camera, which is, the title is Love in the Stars. Gene Sexton became Gene Sexton Bedeau. Bedeau, I think. I'm hoping I'm pronounced that right. Gene, please tell me if I have not. On the 19th of March 2020, the day before the pandemic shut down the courthouse. I wonder if that's why. Actually, if I recall correctly, she actually heard about the shutdown, and that's why they acted quickly to get married, because otherwise they'd have to be waiting for a long time. So for those of you right there, I'm surprised they actually they had this in the Captain's Log, including pictures of Gene and Al getting married, which I thought was quite cool, quite cute, Oh, that, and of course, one thing that did mention in here, which if any of you have been following along to my to news portions, obviously if you're just watching on Twitch or TalkShoe, and that's it. Well, actually, on Twitch or looking at the YouTube video, then you won't know this. But one thing that A2B has been doing lately, A2B has been actually putting out counters, specialized counters for Starfleet Marines. So they have ones for each empires, and actually now they're working on getting miniatures for the Marines, which I think will be quite cool. The difficult part in my mind is that if you use miniatures, minis, you can have these minis, which are, you have minis of like the tanks and the different vehicles, but the actual individual, actually they're not individuals, because of the biggest issue with that, with Starfleet Marines, is that usually you have one piece represents a squadron of those people, a squadron of soldiers, So, and then you have these big minis of the soldiers, and then you have around this, a little smaller when it comes to height wise, these tanks. So, to say the very least, it's not to scale. Which I don't, to be honest, I don't think that would ever work. Because actually, I was thinking about that, and in theory, I guess ADB could create a Starfleet Marines, which is more of ASL, Advanced Squad Leader. For those who are going ASL, what the heck is that? But Advanced Squad Leader. For those of you who don't know about Advanced Squad Leader, it's basically the SFB of close combat games, where each piece represents a single soldier. So it's quite detailed, and has quite a few rules, just like SFB. So if you like that kind of, in my mind, realism when it comes to board games, because that's always the one thing that always got me with SFB, which I love the idea of all the rules to give this feel of realism, you know, without with still abstracting out, the different parts and so forth. Um, so it doesn't interfere with mechanics and so forth. But I guess ADB could do that if there was enough interest. I doubt it, because if people want a ASL version of Starfleet Marines, my guess is people would just get ASL. I'm sure. Actually, I'm one of the bet you. Now I've not looked this up, and since I'm not that big of a close combat game fan. When it comes now, I prefer board games over the live action kind of Call of Duty kind of games. It obviously could create one which is not as detailed as ASL. It's more like a FedCom version, where it's simplified rules, but at the same time, the biggest thing, I'm assuming ASL handles vehicles, within the rule set itself, because that would make no sense if you didn't handle vehicles, at least at some point. I can see them easily starting off with not having any vehicles at all, as the first edition, and then adding on, troop carriers, and possibly even some tanks. At the same time, I don't think ASL is designed to be a tank game. That's one of the things with games you can have. It all depends on what your focus is, because if you want to be a tank game, a lot of times what you do is you abstract out the infantry, the soldiers, part of it. If you're focusing on the individual soldier part of it, like ASL does, then you might abstract away some of the things when it comes to the tanks, and so forth. Because that's one of the things that ADB did, which was for the most part, they glossed over the individual units and said, okay, we've got a squadron here. Boom, that's a squadron of soldiers. Now, a squadron can be made up of, and my understanding is, depending upon the race of those pieces, and I'm using that explicitly, those could be, in the case, maybe 12 humans, or it could be like 4 Gorns or 6 Gorns. I'm not sure what the equivalent is. I think they mentioned it in Starfleet Marines, but I don't remember exactly what the numbers were. So, that being the case, that part is abstracted away. That's why I thought it was cool that ADB had decided to create, even though they're only e-counters, i.e. you can get them in PDF form, and you can print them out. Now, if you print them out, the question is, what do you put them on? Because there's multiple ways of doing it, obviously. one of the ways you can do is you can put it on cardstock, because actually I've done that. I've printed out certain things on heavy cardstock. That's one way to do it. Obviously, another way is if you can get some thicker stock, print it on, you know, print it on regular paper and maybe glue it to counters, or even take some old counters and just glue, that on top of it. There's multiple ways of doing it. The question is what kind of result you will get. It depends on that. If I was to do it, I would probably first try heavy cardstock and see if you could do that. I'm not sure because when it comes to staples, the stock you can get is not that thick. It can be pretty thick, but not as thick as you probably want. And then, of course, you can actually ask them to cut it, which gets expensive as all get out. I was shocked. I was shocked how much it would cost me to actually have them cut those things. I think it was like for each cut, it would cost, I forget, I was thinking maybe $1 per cut or something like that. So if you had just plain ordinary sheet where you had a border around it, that'd be 4 cuts, that'd be $4 to cut that one sheet. So it's like, that's nuts. So moving onward. That's it for the captain's log at the moment. So if you haven't gotten it, and obviously Russ is going to wait until it comes out in electronics form. I don't remember how long A2B waits for it to be available in hard copy before they actually make it available on purely electronically. Actually, that's one thing I need to check on, which is supposedly, according to the Cabs log, there should have been a supplement already available. And as of 2 weeks ago, when I looked for the supplement, I did not find the supplement. There. Sorry about that. There was something in my face. There it goes. So I have to check with A2B to make sure that it is there. As I pointed out to A2B, I did find a couple glitches in the print, which A2B basically said, yeah, it happens. Which is basically there were some boxes, which what those are basically, the boxes are characters that are in there, but they have no representation. They have no actual character. So usually it gets substituted with a box. My guess is those are tabs. Someone hit the tab key, so when they actually, sent it, it was nice and lined up, because it was Q, tab, the question, A, tab, the question. And A2B just copy and pasted. And so the tab actually got copied, got pasted in. Which is heck of a lot easier to do than other things. But that's a minor thing, and A2B kind of brushed it off, and good reason to, because of it doesn't look great. No. Something you should look out for in the future? Yes. Is it something that completely detracts, so you can't, this is unreadable? No. but I'm hoping, for like episode number 55, that they will actually fix that issue, which would be good. Where's give me a sec here, because I'm just wondering if they even have it. If I can find it. Proposal board. Okay. Just for a moment. Okay, that's the one thing that we're doing. Okay. Right. Don't mind me. Don't mind me. I'll join you guys in just a moment. I don't see it. I thought this was it. Maybe I'm wrong. Let's go back just a little bit farther. No, this wasn't it. Okay. No. Nope. I can't find it at the moment. Wow, I forgot about this. Dang. Don't mind me. They. Dang. Just for those of you who are wondering, what in the world is he looking at? And that's this. I'm looking at, it's called the old X2 folder. And this is the old second generation X ship stuff that people who had talked about in the past. I mean, look, yeah, this is the one. The whole idea of structural integrity field proposal, which is one of those things. And this is back in 2004. So this is an old post. This is a 16-year-old post. It's one of those crazy things that tells you how old this board is, and it still exists to this day. So the whole idea of a structural integrity field. The whole idea was that you could shore up the ship with energy to maintain the structure of the ship, i.e., to help it not break down as much. It's like almost like I think you can kind of I think the whole idea was basically to a kind of internal shield to a certain degree. Though what I was looking for was not this stuff, the old X2 folder. I can't find where it is, to be honest. Don't mind me. I'm just okay. This actually is today. Let's do this. There it is. This is what I was looking for. Which was this. That is, as you can see, Module X2, a project for the future. And that is instead of going through all the old posts from 15 years ago, um, obviously there's some new posts about this, and you can see how Steve Cole has been replying to this. In this case, like Alan Turer supposed X2 ships should never break down from a het unless within 8 impulses of a previous het. Nimble X2 never break down from a het, period. But a second het within 8 impulses of previously cost double the power. And Steve Cole just mentioned that it is okay with this if it has player support. And I think that this is actually interesting. In that, okay, let me just do one. This is from back 2018. It looks like it got restarted by who started this thing up again. My guess is probably Gary. No, I'm wrong. It was actually here. Actually, it was Mr. Steve Cole himself mentioning that in 2019 he had lethal surgery which worked, and now it's a better health. Blah, 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 blah. Okay. So when it comes to, that's weird, because I'll read this and you can tell me if this is not weird or not. In January 2019, I had weight loss surgery which worked, and now in much better health. Lost 170 pounds. Now exercise about 15 hours a week, and walk 3 miles a day. There's a personal trainer named Mark who has dialed up my workouts several times. I remarked that the controversy came down to which 3 paths to follow. Option 1, take a non-X ship. And this, see how this is 2018, and he's talking about his health again. And then he goes into, option 1, and now he's talking about the X ships. Take a non-X ship or X1 ship, add more boxes, increase the movement costs, give it some more die rolling and timing bonuses. I rejected this concept as just plain old boring, and I think everyone would agree here is yes, boring. Option 2, so-called 5200 plan, basically take any SD, make minor tweaks, write second generation X tech across the top. When non-X shoot at it, you did only half as much damage. When X2 at an X0 or maybe X1 is twice as much. This one I plan to go with. And then option 3, something really clever that no one has thought of yet, but which instantly catches fire with 100% of the players who love option 3, totally to death. That's also weird, but interesting. And then what happens is he quotes Ken Rogerio. I probably pronounced it. I'm pushing his name, I'm sure. Hero? I think that might be it. And he said, this really isn't the topic. Quoting Steve Cole, who said, this really isn't the topic to discuss 5200 paradigm, so I won't. But the reasons are in the X2 topic, if anyone wants to know. So that's what he likes. And I think most people are wanting more of an option 3. And I totally agree with this, which is not just a copy-paste maneuver, which is tweak the SSDs a little bit, slap on that they're second generation, because basically, again, I think it's almost like the X1, no, option 1, where it's a cop-out. It's 100% a cop out. Okay, I'm still the only person here. You know, I can understand because of Steve Cole's health why I think that's why it got brought up. You know, back in 2018, and now it's 2020. Oh boy, 2020, a year to remember or a year to forget. It all depends on who you are. But anyhow, onward and forward, and that is that I think most people, the reason why a lot of people don't, at least I personally don't like option 2. The reason why I don't like option 2 is because I feel it's a cop out. That you're just marking something X2 and you're not really modifying anything. You're not actually saying, okay, what did they do? Because in my mind, when it comes to second generation X ships, there are what kind of technological changes happened. It's not just stronger, faster, better. Come on, let's be realistic here. You know, which I think is what most people. Yeah, and Steve Cole is saying I can see the gripe that X2 versus X won't be resolution anyway versus GW versus DW. You know, General War. But should it be? Was X1 versus X1? Right. And Mike Refton just mentioned that he's concerned about the 50-20 rule. Might be a bit too drastic, maybe something like 75-150. And he just said, he'll see about it when we get there. But it's much easier to do than half/double than anything else. And I totally agree with that. You don't have to worry about things as much. But and I agree when it comes to going forward. Oh, I agree, Russ. You know, Russ was mentioning that the 500/200 alone is kind of insulting to a customer. Why would I buy a regurgitated SSD that has nothing substantially? We want new tech. And I agree with that. Because the question is, because as I was discussing with Barry earlier this evening, because actually I did talk to Barry, and that is, we did talk about the old X2 ships and some of the improvements that were proposed for the weapons and things like that. And here's one thing. I agree with Steve Cole about the 550-200 rule, in that I think that should be the case, where maybe okay. I'm sorry, I'm going back. Maybe the what we really want with the 550-200 rule is that is kind of the baseline. That there is a difference. The big thing here being that you kind of need that in addition to the new tech, because of that would make it simpler for certain things, i.e., you don't have a ship that goes from, it's stronger. Instead of having 10 hull boxes, now those 10 are considered 20 hull boxes, or those 10 are considered 30 hull boxes. The idea being that when a general warship attacks a second generation X ship, their weapons are less effective. The idea being that you don't have to increase the number of boxes, and when it comes to damage, you can still do, you don't have to take the current weapons and just ramp up the damage and say, okay, now it's second generation. And as Russ pointed out, we as customers want new tech. We want to know how does the Federation improve the photon torpedo? Or here's a drastic concept. Here's a freaking drastic concept. What if the Federation Empire, if they change weapons altogether, they still stick to the same overall concept of how their ships and fleets work and interact. That is that most of their weapons they have quite a few of direct fire weapons. That's their main source of damage, is direct fire weapons. But with the smaller ships, they have seeking weapons. Now the thing is, the one thing that I think still has to be drawn forward from the original concept of the second generation X ships is this. Second generation X ships, the whole idea wasn't that you had this super huge fleet of ships. So in the case of the Federation, you no longer have fighters. Why would you have fighters? There's no need for fighters. The only time I can imagine even advanced fighters at all when it comes to, like, other than the Hydrants, because in my mind, the Hydrants, they need second generation fighters. Plain simple. Why? Because that is the way their design philosophy was based. They were based on the idea of that you had these basic casual carriers, and those casual carriers would then have these fighters, which then were considered expendable, but you could actually in that role, it's like the Andromedans and their satellite ships. That is part of what they are. Because let's just go there anyway. Let's say the Andromedans had second generation X ships, which, in my mind, they did. Now, obviously, the big issue there is, well, here's always the question for me when it comes to the Andromedans. I'll go there just for a moment, which is, and I've discussed this before. Anyone who've been listening to me for a while, you know what I'm about to say, which is that in my mind, the question is that where the Andromedans, did they actually work on improving their tech? Because in my mind, when it comes to the Andromedans, the feel I got is that the Andromedans said, okay, they found out how, they said, okay, we're going after this galaxy. They formed the bridge to the LMC because they knew that was going to be their launching point into the Milky Way. Now, given that, because LMC was relatively much smaller, they could probably take them over and subdue it faster. Now, the question, and then they build that bridge to bring in resources. Now, the question that's never been answered, and I don't think it can be answered, which is how long did it take the ships to get from the Andromedan galaxy to the LMC? And from what we saw, the tech really did not improve. They had a certain kind of ships that they made, very limited. They did not modify their ships based on the forces that they encountered in that galaxy. In other words, modify the building of ships at that point. Now, I might be missing something because, for all I know, I might be missing something in that those desecrator bases. They were building ships because obviously they were building devastators, um, which means they actually could build ships themselves. Now, the plans for those ships were those the old plans, and that's the way there's no way of updating those designs, or what? So I can see that second generation Andromedan ship coming from the main Andromeda galaxy just it never reached the galactics because it takes so long to travel from the Andromeda galaxy in to the Milky Way, and I'm willing to bet that the Andromedas basically had a centralized system where everything came from headquarters basically, and then they would travel out and they did some scouting early on, and then they said, okay, this is what we're going to need to defeat them, and obviously they would have, and they did. If you look at the dark future, it's just that we have the big time warp kind of thing, and that's why they were defeated, and that's the only reason they were defeated. Okay, well, getting back to the X2, second generation X ships, Ross was just mentioning that he looks at X2 as a huge opportunity to make all the fixes to the SFB without changing the base SFB. Why be limited by a 32 impulse chart that has been pushed beyond its limits, for example? That's an interesting thing. That is a question, is it not? And that is that for second generation X ships, do we stick with 32 impulses? Do we move to 64? Wow, that's an interesting idea because of what you can. That's the question. The question I'm thinking in my head is that, okay, let's say we change from 32 impulse chart to 64 impulse chart. Just for giggles. Let's go that way because there's two ways of doing it. There's that, and then there's multiple moves per impulse. That's another way of doing it. The question is that if you go to 64 impulse chart, and obviously the first generation, the General War ships could only move maximum speed of 31. Well, let's say that the second generation can move speed 63, which is really fast. At that point, do we then also say that general warships can only react every other impulse versus second generation X ships can react every impulse? Do we add that onto the change? I'm not sure, honestly. Versus, just, as I said, doubling up on moves, saying that each impulse, instead of only being allowed to move once, based on your speed, you can move up to speed 63. Crazy idea. That you can move more than once in an impulse, which actually we already have some units, sabot plasmas that can move up to speed 40, speed 40. So there are, that makes it, let me think, 8. So there's 8 impulses that you do double moves, which is always a weird thing. But the issue that being there is that we've already shown that we do have units that can move greater than 32 impulses. Speed of 32, sorry. Um, and I think if you read this topic, Module X2, a project for the future, I think that overall, that I think most people will agree that that like Russ, they want new tech, and I think I agree with Steve Cole's perspective too, that that you need a 5200 plan, and that is about the doubling and lessening of damage based on generations. Because I think, but as I said, I don't think these are mutually exclusive. I think, really honestly, that I think that would be a good idea to have both of those, because as Russ and I totally agree with, which is that we want new tech. How far do you move the plasma torpedoes? Do you still, I think overall, see, here's the thing. Things like plasma torpedoes, drones, photon torpedoes, disruptors, things like that, I could see them moving that technology forward. The question is, what will it look like? Because what am I thinking of? Because I'm thinking of is like the Defiant is what I'm thinking of in Deep Space Nine. Meaning the whole idea was that the Defiant itself had this different kind of tech when it comes to some of those things. Now, I'm going to ignore the cloaking device, which was a trick system borrowed from the Romulans and so forth. That's what Kanan. That's what it says. But like, I think there was pulse cannons. I think it was. I forget exactly the different tech that was added, which was not normally the kind of tech that the Federation used. So it wasn't just photons that the Defiant had different weapon systems that weren't ever existed before when it comes to the Federation. And I think that is the kind of thing that needs to go forward with these different empires. Now, their tactics and the way their ships are designed and so forth, when it comes to the interactivity of those weapon systems, I think need to stay in place. The flavor, as people will call it. For example, plasma torpedo ships still have plasma torpedoes. I think, as Barry and I pointed out, one of those things that was brought in, I think in supplemental number 2, was the whole idea of pseudo torpedoes. You actually could create them. Now, is that a good thing? I think it is. Having the second generation X ships could actually, using power itself, you actually could create these pseudo plasma torpedoes. So in other words, it wouldn't be limited to a single one, which then only can be reloaded as part of repairs to the ship, kind of thing. Between scenario things that takes a long while to do. And I can see that being the next technology. But the whole idea being that plasma ships would still have seeking weapons as their main way of doing damage. Same for Zinnies, where drones were it. Klingons, more of the disruptors and phasers. It did have drones, just like Federation had drones and Zinnies. Maybe with the Lyrans, have the ESGs, as Gary pointed out, the whole idea of ESGs working in a different fashion, maybe working in the way that they work in FedCom. Have a pulse that instead of having it's just this sphere, it's actually a pulse that blows out from the ship, and just have this ever expanding, an actual expanding ESG actually expanding sphere generator, not just a expanded sphere generator. So that kind of changes to the tech where those were improvements are put forward, but still it doesn't change the flavor of the ship, for the different empires. And I think that's the way to go. And in addition to the 500/200 plan, where the general warships don't do as much damage to second generation X ships because of their shields are different. The shields are so much better than the general warships. And just the and you can say whole kind of technobabble, which is that the way the shields are generated, they discovered a new technology, maybe stole it from the Andromedans, whatever, modified that technology when it comes to the shielding that greatly improved it, so that and then of course the weapons themselves were improved, and therefore the numbers are the same. But so I think that actually would be a good idea, and I really, I'm looking forward to them actually working on the X2 project, and I'm hoping that some of those weapons changes can actually come to fruition. And I think some of those things that were in supplement number 2 could actually be used. Tone them down a bit in some cases. Obviously, the amount of damage, don't change it, but change the way the weapons themselves operate. I think that would be a better way of doing it. Okay, well, that I think I'm going to wrap up for this evening. So with that, I am Paul Franz, and I bid you a good night.